Hi everyone, this is Jackie Cooper with Jcoopertravels, and today I have a really special guest, Dr. Souza. He has done some remarkable things in his life, and I'm super excited to have him on the podcast today. Just for those of you that might not know, Jcoopertravels podcast is an interview style podcast where I feature various individuals, and then we have a sprinkle of travel at the end. So, Dr. Souza, thank you so much for being on
You're
the
welcome.
podcast. Can you tell us a little bit more about your what you're currently doing and your
Okay,
career, because you've done some remarkable things.
thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, I can just kind of go down the list of the things I'm working on right now. And let me, I guess, put it in perspective too. I have about 30 years experience in commercial real estate investment research. I'm a real estate broker, but I'm also an investment manager too. So I like to marry the two worlds together to be able to come up with better solutions for my clients. I'm just finishing up a life science paper for a brokerage firm. They're going to be launching an investment program around life science real estate here in the Bay Area. And they engaged me and asked me to write a fairly extensive paper that will be used not only to market the program, but also to really profile what's going on in life science. And life science is cool because it's converging now with technology. So between technology, life science, and COVID, that property sector is extremely hot right now, and it's really exciting to work in that area. I also just finished a project. I started this project 4 years ago, and actually I developed some of the methodology 10 years ago. And what I partnered with a tech company, a friend of mine, and what we did was we basically put the mathematics together to construct a portfolio of real estate securities based on the overall real estate market. That took us 4 years total, 2 years just to design the program. Took us a year to raise the money, took us a year to negotiate the contract, and took us a year to develop the product. And then from that product, we're working on other securities and other portfolio products, which I find really interesting and fascinating. I also have moved on to the mortgage lending side. I've done some investment brokerage before, but there was a gap, in my matrix, which was the mortgage finance piece. I have the
Yeah.
real estate investments, the research, energy, investment management, all the boxes were basically, being filled in over the last 10 years. But there was one big piece that was missing, which was really the mortgage finance side. So I partnered with my surf buddy with a company called Searchlight Lending. And it's actually been going pretty well right now. I probably have about 6 deals in the pipeline right now that I'm working on at different stages. The tech company that I partnered with was another friend of mine. That company is called capitalbrain.co. They spent about 4 years developing the technology. You may want to go up and check out that website. We're tracking about $63 billion in real estate private equity. And to develop that platform was really the technology that we used for some of the other projects. And I continue to do business development for that company too. I actually put together a team of my students. About 12 of my students came to me at the end of the semester, last semester, and said, Professor Souza, I lost my job. I lost my internship. I don't know what to do. I don't want to waste my time. I said, come work with me. I'll put you on a bunch of projects. We'll write some papers. We'll work with a bunch of these companies. And I spent 2.5 weeks training five students of mine to sell manufactured home framing for my tech company that also does construction and manufacturing. So I trained them in that. It was extremely amazing to watch them develop and transform very quickly. And then another company that I've been working with for about 10 years but they brought me back about 4 years ago to what we're doing is micro data centers on site at power plants. So if you know anything about data centers, they're like these big hyperscale, industrial buildings. They could be, worth or cost about $1 billion to construct. And what we decided to do, since we had, backgrounds in energy, capital markets, and real estate, was we said, well, why don't we scale those down into like micro data centers and put them on site at power plants so that we can get workloads from Amazon or Google or some of the large tech companies and basically process those workloads on site at the power plants at about a 40 to 50% cost savings, because we're not in the retail market, down the road along the grid. In the regulated market, we're actually in the wholesale market on site at the power plant at power. So that was amazing. And then my CEO basically said, what we should do? We should, modify the technology and the product, do racks of computation and put them on site at commercial real estate facilities. I said, that's freaking brilliant. And he said, well, will you head up, the effort to basically communicate, what we're doing to large institutional investors, pension funds, investment banks, venture capitalists, property technology, funding companies, and will you also, use your network and your background to go talk to some of the large operators, either Jones Lang LaSalle, Cushman Wakefield, CB Richard Ellis, Hines, maybe Kilroy, Boston Properties, Equity Office, some of the large, portfolio owners. And then the idea is to deploy these on a national basis and then create a national grid, really a telecom grid that basically brings the internet to the edge, to the curbside, basically to be able to do autonomous vehicles, because the intermittency is not working. The building owners can run all of their mechanical building software applications on it if they want to. They could even sell, hyper speed, hybrid cloud services right there on site to their tenants. Or what we'll do is we'll direct the workloads from all of these companies and aggregators. It will basically do the workloads on site in your machines, in your basement, which we weren't using anyway, to basically generate gross potential rental income and increase the economic occupancy for your building and your portfolio. And a lot of those real estate owners right now are really struggling because of the COVID and what's really happening to the real estate.
What I love about everything that you're talking about is the integration of science and math and policy. All these various fields are coming together in such a multidisciplinary fashion, and the applications are multiples, across various areas. I'm fascinated with how you even got started in this area. I mean, I know you have a doctorate, but I mean, what was your history of when you got started? Was it in science? Was it in the social studies? How did you even get into this? Because like I said, at the start, you've done some remarkable things. And what was your path?
Yeah, well, I'll just put it in perspective. I grew up born and raised in Oakland with a, Portuguese family that owned a restaurant. My grandparents were immigrants. And I started working in my family's restaurant when I was 10 years old, and I left there when I was 20. So I had already retired at 20 from, the restaurant business. And then, I knew I wanted to go to college, be the first one in my family, but I didn't have any money. We didn't have any money, and my parents weren't really willing to support me on it. So I went and worked parking lots in San Francisco because I wanted to be in San Francisco. And I made enough money working parking lots to put myself through college. And then as I, got out of college, I decided, well, I didn't go to Ivy League, and I got to compete against the Ivy League, and I'm probably as good as the Ivy League. So how do I compete against the Ivy League? So what I did was I got into research and stuck in research and built careers running research departments for large brokerage firms and investment management firms and uh, you know, in that space. And I figured, well, I can just do a career, or what I got to do is I got to catch up and accelerate myself. And the only way I figured doing that is to couple my work with my academics. So I went straight back into school, did the master's in applied economics. I did, an accounting degree. I did a master's in information systems, political science, public administration, finance, did the doctorate degree. I did that over a 15-year, almost a 20-year period. And I started teaching when I was 30. And I've been teaching for over 20 years. So the combination between teaching, academics, and working was extremely exhausting. I mean, I worked 7 days a week for 15 years.
Yeah.
But that gave me a comparative advantage, not only from the experience standpoint, but once I got the doctorate degree and once people saw the breadth and depth, of my academic credentials along with my applied credentials, then I became highly sought after because everybody wants to have a resident PhD, in their tech company, right? So to give them legitimacy. So I started being pulled in multiple directions, and then I decided, instead of doing kind of a mono-focused, single-focused career trajectory, in 2003, I decided that I would build basically a program made up of a portfolio of different startups and different initiatives, and basically try to manage at least 5 projects or 5 startups at any one time, because the mortality rates are very high for a lot of these startup companies. And as 1 or 2 would die on the vine, I would try and replace them with something else.
Yeah, exactly.
So that I was constantly learning how to not be conditionally responsed by having to feel like I have to work for somebody and I have to work for somebody and try to please somebody. When I found that I was able to not only work for somebody, but also manage my own portfolio of projects, that totally emancipated me and allowed me to become a principal, to be able to then negotiate my own transactions on my own terms and decide if I wanted to be a part of these efforts. And then the teaching allowed me to work with some brilliant young people. And then I got to decide, who I wanted to take with me on this journey and to place them in some of my affiliated companies and place them in other companies, because my feeling was that at the end of the day, the number one metric for my success is investing my own human capital and human equity into these individuals and watching them go off and become highly successful. That's the true return on equity, is what I'm really passionate about.
I love the message that you're sharing. I love the message that you're sharing about your family history, your determination, your tenacity, your creativity, never giving up, and seeing different ways that you could navigate. And then also your mindset in terms of, because I definitely understand and resonate with what you're saying about the mindset of working for someone and working with someone, because it's when you work for someone, you're capped by the hours, you're capped by approval, you're capped in so many different ways. But when you work with someone, then there's an equity, there's still, and there's a respect. You're still together in partnership, and you still might be within their company, but it's a different layer. And the fact that you are looking at reinvesting in the next generation, I can definitely resonate with too, because I'm also a teacher. So I understand, because I've gone in a smaller way than you, I've gone through various career trajectories as well. I started in law, still licensed in law, and I navigated to special ed teaching, but I've always had some sort of, because I'm also an entrepreneur, so I've always had some sort of business that I've been working with. Some have succeeded, some haven't, but again, I just love the idea that with each one, you learn a lesson and you keep going, you apply that. So, you're falling forward and each one becomes more successful. And hopefully as an individual, I've evolved too, because again, just like you, I want to help others, and so, and that's one of the reasons why I created the podcast, is I wanted to have other people hear messages like yours, so they understand that no matter where you start, you have a whole breadth of where you can go. So, yeah, no, so this is exciting. Where do you see yourself, or where do you see your projects in about 5 to 10 years?
Well, I'd like to be retired in in 5 to 10 years. I mean, I look pretty good. I've held up pretty well, but I'm almost 60 years old. I don't feel 60, but I'm hoping that in 5 years I will have another company, a holding company. So a lot of these companies will be rolled under into a holding company of virtual strategic partnerships.
Got it.
And I will be, again, the principal, the program manager at that. I'm doing it now, but I'm getting ready. I haven't launched the company yet, but I've already written the business plan. I already know exactly what it looks like. It's a timing issue.
Yeah, of course.
Because I'm marketing some of my other companies first to get them up and running. I don't want to dilute my brand and dilute my message.
Understood.
At this point.
So when you retire, because it's all going to come back to travel, where do you think you want to travel? What's on your bucket list of where to go?
Well, I'll tell you where I've been, which I loved.
Where have you been?
I played rugby in my late 20s on the first Rugby World Cup tour to Australia and New Zealand.
I want to go to there.
And I love New Zealand rugby, and I love Australian rugby and European rugby, and I would love to go back there. The people are beautiful. It's a beautiful country, and it's a lot like the Bay Area, but the people are just super nice, and I mean they do anything for you, and that means a lot. I loved going to Rome.
Yes.
It was beautiful right around Christmas time to visit, the Vatican and the Pope, and watch, the Mass and go into the Sistine Chapel. I mean, that was transformative, and the people are beautiful, and the food was great. Would love to, maybe go down to Milan or some other parts of Italy. I loved Paris. I think the Parisians, under, decades of, and millennial of monarchies, had basically designed one of the most beautiful urban, spaces, and especially the Arc de Triomphe is such an amazing, not only monolith in its own right, but everything in Paris converges to the Arc. Mm-hmm. and revolves around it. If you ever looked at it from the top, it's like, holy shit, these guys were freaking brilliant. They knew exactly what they were doing when they redesigned the urban scape. I thought London was amazing, just the difference of the architecture, because it was a global power for so many years, and you can really see it in the architecture. I would love to do Lisbon in Portugal, and to go to the Madeira Islands and the Azores to see where my grandparents, were born. And I really did like, this is a little different, but I would definitely go back to Berlin. I had studied World War II history, particularly the Holocaust, when I was in my early 20s, because they never taught us it, at my high school. And I thought that was insane. And I wanted to figure out why humans could do something like that. So I studied it for years and felt that I had to go to Berlin, and I would probably go to Warsaw and Warsaw and probably Poland to go see the concentration camps. That's one thing I want to do.
Definitely. I mean, I definitely, understand what you're sharing too. I mean, history, there's a lot of good, and then there's also things that we need to remember. So that way it doesn't get repeated. So for sure. Thank you so much for sharing. Any last minute thoughts that you want to share with our listeners? Because you've shared a lot. You've talked about some of your companies and everything. Are any of
Sure.
your companies looking for clients or?
Yeah. Yeah. The mortgage brokerage company, which is the Searchlight Lending,
Yeah.
is one. The I do have an investment management company, but I'm not going to mention that just from compliance purposes. But if anybody wants to work with me, as an advisor, I'd be more than happy to work with them. We are looking to raise a Series A round, an institutional round of $5 million for Green Spark. If you want to go up to the website and take a look at it, and if you're interested and you're in investing in that type of effort, we're always looking for a good partner, on that, or partners for that, probably partner. And then, I do investment brokerage in apartments here in Northern California.
So for those that are listening, there's a little box above the podcast as well as above the YouTube. And I know you might be driving or listening and you might not be able to write things down. So just visit the podcast or the YouTube, and there'll be ways that you can contact Dr. Souza. So again, I'll make sure that, all the various points of reference that he brought up, you'll be able to kind of access.
And the last thing I like to help people out is if they're looking to go on to a master's or a doctorate or a law degree, I could advise them on that too.
That's great. I'm sure that there'll be different people reaching out to you on that as well. So
I'd love to work with them.
Anyway, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate your being on, and I'm sure that there's many of the projects that you're talking about. We might do follow-up podcasts, so everyone stay in tune, so that way you can see what's next on our adventure. And thank you so much, and have a great day, everyone.
Yeah, thanks, Jackie.